The morning sun painted the aircraft carrier deck in golden streaks as Admiral James Mitchell stood on the bridge, his weathered hands gripping the railing. At 62, he had seen everything the Navy could throw at him, or so he thought. 3 decades of service had taught him to expect the unexpected, but today would test even his vast experience. The USS Constellation was conducting routine training exercises 200 miles off the California coast. The massive carrier cut through the Pacific swells like a knife through butter, its deck buzzing with activity as dozens of crew members prepared for the day's flight operations. The smell of jet fuel mixed with salt air filled the Admiral's nostrils as he watched his pilots gear up for what should have been a standard mission. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen had been awake since 0400 hours, running through her pre-flight checks with the precision of a Swiss watch. Her FA-18 Super Hornet sat gleaming on the deck, its engines already warming under the careful attention of the maintenance crew. Sarah had been flying for 8 years, but today felt different. Today, she was leading a formation that would demonstrate new combat maneuvers to a group of visiting foreign naval officers. The briefing room had been tense that morning. Colonel Martinez, the wing commander, had pulled Sarah aside after the main briefing. His face carried the weight of unspoken concerns as he spoke in low tones about the importance of this mission. The visiting delegation included officers from several allied nations, all eager to see American naval aviation at its finest. Any mistake would reflect poorly not just on the squadron, but on the entire Navy's reputation. Sarah understood the pressure. She had felt it before, though perhaps not quite so intensely. As one of only 12 female pilots on the carrier, every flight felt like she was representing more than just herself. The weight of breaking barriers and changing perceptions rode on her shoulders like an invisible passenger, never quite letting her forget what she meant to the young women watching from below. The maintenance chief, Master Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, finished his final inspection of Sarah's aircraft. He had been working on Navy jets for over 20 years and had seen hundreds of pilots come and go. There was something special about Lieutenant Commander Chen, though. She had a focus and determination that reminded him of the best pilots he had ever worked with, regardless of gender. Her attention to detail was meticulous, and she treated her aircraft and crew with the respect they deserved. As Sarah climbed into her cockpit, she could feel eyes on her from across the deck. Some looks were curious, others skeptical, but most were simply professional acknowledgement from one aviator to another. She had earned her place here through skill, determination, and countless hours of training that pushed her beyond what most people thought possible. The communications crackled to life in her helmet as air traffic control began coordinating the morning's launches. Sarah's formation would be the third to take off, giving her time to run through her mental checklist one more time. She thought about her father, a retired Air Force pilot who had initially been skeptical about his daughter's choice to pursue military aviation. His skepticism had long since turned to pride, especially after watching her graduate at the top of her flight training class. Admiral Mitchell continued his observation from the bridge, unaware that the pilot he was about to witness would challenge everything he thought he knew about naval aviation. His aide, Lieutenant Johnson, approached with a clipboard full of morning reports. The Admiral scanned them quickly, his mind focused on the demonstration flight that would begin shortly. The foreign naval officers had gathered on the observation deck, their uniforms representing nations from across the globe. They spoke in hushed tones about American military capabilities and the legendary skill of Navy pilots. Some had flown combat missions themselves, while others were more focused on the strategic implications of what they would witness today. Sarah's squadron leader, Commander Thompson, was already in his aircraft, running through final systems checks. He had specifically requested Sarah for this mission, knowing her exceptional flying skills would showcase their squadron's capabilities perfectly. Thompson had been flying for 15 years and had never seen a pilot with better spatial awareness or more precise control inputs than Sarah. The deck crew moved with practiced efficiency, their color-coded vests creating a choreographed dance around the multi-million-dollar aircraft. Yellow-shirted directors guided planes into position, while green-shirted maintenance personnel made final adjustments. The catapult crew, wearing blue vests, prepared the steam-powered launch system that would hurl the jets from 0 to 150 miles per hour in less than 3 seconds. Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly as she prepared for launch. Not from nervousness, but from the same excitement that had drawn her to flying in the first place. There was something magical about the moment just before takeoff, when tons of metal and technology prepared to defy gravity through human skill and engineering brilliance. The morning's weather was perfect for flying, with clear skies and minimal wind. Visibility extended for miles in every direction, providing ideal conditions for the complex maneuvers the squadron would be performing. Sarah knew this was exactly the kind of day that could make or break a demonstration flight. As the signal came for her squadron to prepare for launch, Sarah's mind shifted into complete focus. Years of training had prepared her for this moment, and she was ready to show the world what Navy pilots could accomplish. The catapult officer raised his hand, signaling the final moments before launch. Sarah felt the familiar sensation of her Super Hornet being attached to the steam catapult, the massive machinery that would soon launch her into the morning sky. Her engines roared to full power, creating a thunderous noise that echoed across the carrier deck. The sound was music to her ears, representing power, freedom, and the culmination of years of dedicated training. Commander Thompson's voice crackled through her headset, confirming their flight plan one final time. The squadron would perform a series of precision maneuvers designed to showcase their tactical capabilities, including high-speed passes, formation flying, and simulated combat scenarios. Each pilot knew their role perfectly, having practiced these maneuvers dozens of times over the previous weeks. The catapult officer dropped his hand, and Sarah felt the incredible force of acceleration as her 18-ton aircraft shot forward like a bullet. In 2.5 seconds, she went from a complete stop to 165 miles per hour, experiencing forces that would pin her back in her seat with tremendous pressure. The edge of the carrier deck rushed toward her, and then suddenly she was airborne, climbing rapidly into the clear Pacific sky. The sensation of flight never got old for Sarah. As her Super Hornet gained altitude, the massive aircraft carrier below began to look like a toy floating on a vast blue carpet. Other ships in the battle group appeared as tiny specks, their impressive size diminished by the perspective that only flight could provide. The morning sun caught her canopy, filling the cockpit with warm golden light that seemed to energize her for the mission ahead. Admiral Mitchell watched from the bridge as the formation took shape above the carrier. Through his binoculars, he could see the 4 Super Hornets arranging themselves into a diamond pattern, their sleek profiles cutting through the air with remarkable precision. The foreign observers stood mesmerized by the display, many taking photographs and notes about what they were witnessing. Sarah took her position as flight leader, with the other 3 aircraft following her commands. Her voice came through the radio with calm authority as she directed the formation through their first series of maneuvers. The squadron moved as one entity, turning and banking in perfect synchronization that spoke to countless hours of practice and exceptional pilot skill. The first demonstration involved high-speed passes over the carrier. Sarah led the formation in a steep dive from 8,000 feet, accelerating to over 500 miles per hour as they screamed past the ship's superstructure. The roar of their engines created a thunderclap that could be felt in the chest of every person on deck. The foreign observers looked up in amazement as the 4 jets flashed overhead in perfect formation, their afterburners creating brilliant flames against the blue sky. Admiral Mitchell found himself genuinely impressed by the precision of the flight. He had seen thousands of demonstrations during his career, but this particular squadron was performing at an exceptional level. The lead pilot especially seemed to have an intuitive understanding of aerial dynamics that transformed the mechanical act of flying into something approaching art. The second phase of the demonstration involved simulated air-to-air combat scenarios. Sarah's formation split into two elements, with her wingman following her into mock combat against the other pair. The aircraft twisted and turned through the sky in a deadly dance, each pilot pushing their machine to its limits while maintaining absolute safety standards. G-forces that would incapacitate untrained individuals were absorbed and managed by pilots whose bodies had been conditioned for exactly this type of stress. Master Chief Rodriguez watched from the deck, tracking Sarah's aircraft through a pair of powerful binoculars. He had worked on her plane personally and felt a sense of pride knowing that his maintenance work was contributing to such an exceptional display. The Super Hornet responded to every input with precision, its systems functioning flawlessly under the demanding conditions of aerobatic flight. The demonstration's climax involved a maneuver called the carrier brake, where all four aircraft would approach the ship at high speed in close formation, then separate dramatically in different directions before individual landing approaches. This required split-second timing and absolute trust between pilots, as any mistake could result in catastrophic collision. Sarah's voice came through the radio with crisp professionalism as she set up the approach. The formation descended from altitude, building speed as they lined up with the carrier's flight deck. From the bridge, Admiral Mitchell could see them approaching as tiny dots that rapidly grew larger, their jet engines creating a distinctive whine that grew louder with each passing second. At exactly the right moment, Sarah called for the brake. Her aircraft peeled off to the left in a sharp bank that seemed to defy physics, while her wingman broke right. The second element split high and low, creating a spectacular display of precision flying that left the observers speechless. Each pilot executed their individual approach pattern, setting up for what would be a series of perfect carrier landings. The first aircraft touched down with a controlled crash onto the carrier deck, its tailhook catching the arresting cable with a shower of sparks and a tremendous jolt that brought the speeding jet to a complete stop in less than 300 feet. One by one, the other pilots followed, each landing executed with the kind of precision that made carrier aviation legendary throughout the world. Admiral Mitchell prepared to congratulate the squadron on an exceptional demonstration. He walked toward the area where the pilots would disembark from their aircraft, expecting to meet the usual group of male aviators who had been dominating Navy flight operations for decades. The foreign observers followed, eager to meet the pilots responsible for such an impressive display of skill and professionalism. As the engines wound down and the deck crew secured the aircraft, the canopy of the lead Super Hornet began to open. Admiral Mitchell strode across the deck with purpose, his mind already formulating the congratulations he would offer to what he assumed was another exceptional male pilot. The foreign naval officers followed closely behind, their cameras ready to capture the moment they would meet the aviator responsible for such an extraordinary demonstration of flying skill. The deck crew rushed to secure the aircraft as the engines finally spun down to silence. Steam rose from the hot metal surfaces, creating small clouds that drifted across the flight deck in the morning breeze. The smell of jet fuel and hot metal filled the air, familiar scents that had accompanied countless similar moments throughout the Admiral's long career. As the lead aircraft's canopy fully opened, Admiral Mitchell called out in his booming command voice, "Who's piloting that jet?" His tone carried the authority of decades at sea and the genuine admiration of a career naval officer who had just witnessed exceptional airmanship. He fully expected to see the familiar sight of another talented young male aviator climbing out of the cockpit. The pilot began to emerge from the aircraft, moving with the careful precision that all carrier pilots learned when exiting their multi-million-dollar machines. First came the helmet, then the flight suit, and finally the unmistakable figure of Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen as she stepped down onto the carrier deck. The Admiral's expression shifted from anticipation to complete shock in the span of a single heartbeat. His mouth fell open slightly as his brain processed what his eyes were telling him. Standing before him was not the male pilot he had expected, but a woman whose performance had just exceeded every expectation he could have imagined for naval aviation. Sarah removed her helmet, revealing shoulder-length dark hair that had been compressed by hours inside the flight gear. Her face showed the slight marks that all pilots carried after long flights, evidence of the pressure and concentration required for carrier operations. She stood with quiet confidence, well aware that her presence was challenging assumptions, but prepared to face whatever reactions might follow. The foreign observers stood in stunned silence, their cameras forgotten as they processed this unexpected revelation. Several had served in air forces where women were not permitted in combat roles, making Sarah's exceptional performance even more impressive and significant. The implications of what they had just witnessed began to sink in, challenging their own preconceptions about gender and military capability. Master Chief Rodriguez approached with barely contained pride, carrying Sarah's post-flight paperwork. He had worked with her for over 2 years, and had watched her develop into one of the finest pilots he had ever supported. The look of shock on the Admiral's face was familiar to him, as he had seen similar reactions from other senior officers who encountered Sarah for the first time. Admiral Mitchell struggled to find words, his military composure temporarily shaken by the complete reversal of his expectations. In his 3 decades of naval service, he had encountered female pilots before, but none who had demonstrated such exceptional skill and leadership in such a high-visibility situation. The performance he had just witnessed would have been impressive from any pilot, regardless of gender. Sarah stepped forward and rendered a crisp salute, her voice clear and professional as she spoke. "Lieutenant Commander Chen reporting, Admiral. Mission complete, sir. All aircraft and personnel accounted for." Her tone carried no trace of defensiveness or apology, simply the confidence of a professional naval officer who had successfully completed her assigned mission. The Admiral returned her salute automatically, his military training taking over while his mind continued to process the situation. "Lieutenant Commander," he began, then paused as he searched for appropriate words. "That was exceptional flying. I've been observing naval aviation for 30 years, and what I just witnessed was among the finest demonstrations I've ever seen." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, and Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction that had nothing to do with proving anything to anyone and everything to do with the simple pride of a job well done. She had not flown this mission to make a statement about gender equality or to challenge anyone's assumptions. She had flown it because it was her job, and she was exceptionally good at that job. Commander Thompson approached, having completed his own post-flight procedures. He had been watching the interaction with interest, knowing that Admiral Mitchell was experiencing the same surprise that many senior officers felt when first encountering Sarah's capabilities. Thompson had specifically requested her for this mission precisely because he knew her performance would exceed all expectations. The foreign naval officers began to recover from their surprise, and several approached Sarah with questions about her training, experience, and the techniques she had demonstrated during the flight. Their professional curiosity overcame any initial shock, and soon she was engaged in detailed technical discussions about aerodynamics, combat tactics, and carrier operations. Admiral Mitchell found himself reevaluating decades of assumptions about naval aviation and military leadership. He realized that his surprise said more about his own preconceptions than it did about Sarah's capabilities. The evidence of her exceptional skill was undeniable, and it forced him to confront the fact that talent and dedication were not limited by gender. As the morning progressed and the deck crews prepared for the next launch cycle, word of Sarah's exceptional demonstrations spread throughout the ship. Young sailors who had watched from below decks approached to ask questions and express their admiration. Several female crew members spoke with her privately, inspired by seeing someone who looked like them performing at the highest levels of their profession. The ripple effects of that morning would extend far beyond the USS Constellation. The foreign observers returned to their home countries with new perspectives on the capabilities of female military personnel. Admiral Mitchell became an advocate for expanding opportunities for women in naval aviation, his conversion based not on politics or policy, but on the undeniable evidence of exceptional performance he had witnessed firsthand. Sarah continued flying, leading missions and training new pilots with the same dedication and skill that had surprised an admiral and changed minds across multiple navies. She never thought of herself as breaking barriers or making statements. She simply flew, and she flew exceptionally well.